A black single father took in a young woman for just one night, never knowing she was the daughter of a millionaire. You really think you can take advantage of my daughter and get away with it? The cold voice of Richard cut through the phone as Arthur gripped the receiver, his hands trembling. I will destroy you and your pathetic little family. Arthur Sua, 34, worked the night shift as a nurse and had never imagined that a simple act of kindness would turn into the worst nightmare of his life. 3 weeks earlier, during a violent storm, he came across a young woman drenched and terrified on the side of the road. Without hesitation, he offered her shelter in the modest home he shared with his 7-year-old daughter, Isabella. She introduced herself as Emma, a college student who had just lost her wallet and phone. For 2 weeks, she lived with them as if she were part of the family, helping with chores, playing with Isabella, and building bonds that felt sincere. Arthur had no idea that Emma was actually Sophia Richard, heiress to a $200 million real estate empire. Daddy, who's yelling on the phone. Isabella wandered into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Arthur forced a smile as he set down the receiver, but his heart was pounding. Richard's threat had been unmistakable accusations of kidnapping, the destruction of his career, and the loss of custody of Isabella. What Richard didn't know was that Arthur had carefully documented every moment Sophia had spent with them. Not out of suspicion, but because years of working in a hospital had ingrained in him the habit of recording everything, every conversation, every tearful expression of gratitude, from the young woman, every genuine moment of affection between her and Isabella. All of it stored safely away. When Sophia left that morning, she'd left nothing but a handwritten thank you note. Arthur could never have guessed that 3 days later his life would be turned upside down. The first sign came when he was called into the hospital boardroom. We've received an anonymous complaint about inappropriate conduct outside of work, his supervisor said, avoiding his eyes. Later, Arthur watched as security officers searched his apartment under a suspicious court order. Isabella clung to his leg, both confused and frightened. He gently stroked her hair and whispered, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Some powerful people are about to find out they've picked the wrong man to underestimate. If you're following this injustice and don't want to miss the moment the truth comes out, stay tuned, because what's about to happen will prove that even the richest man can be brought down by a single recording." Richard's assault escalated quickly. The next day, Arthur got a call from Isabella's school saying her tuition payments had been blocked due to pending legal issues. The same thing happened to his health insurance, his bank account, even the mortgage on his small apartment. "Daddy, why did the lady at school say I can't eat in the cafeteria anymore?" Isabella asked as Arthur drove her home. The confusion and fear in her innocent eyes were things he had never wanted her to experience, especially not because of his kindness. Arthur pulled her close, feeling the heat of injustice burning in his chest. Richard was wielding financial power like a weapon, cutting off every lifeline Arthur had. This wasn't just revenge, it was an attempt to obliterate an innocent family. The next call came at 2 a.m. "See, that's how easy it is to tear apart your pathetic little life. Tomorrow I'll cancel the rest of your contracts. In a week you'll be on the street. And that's only the beginning." What Richard didn't know was that Arthur had grown up in public orphanages, surviving a system that had tried to break him since he was 5 years old. He knew exactly what it was like to have everything stripped away, to be underestimated because of the color of his skin and the lack of a respectable last name. "My father built an empire with his own hands," Richard continued, arrogance dripping from every word. "And you're just a leech clinging to something that doesn't belong to you. Sophia was weak, lost, and you took advantage of that." Arthur remained silent, letting him reveal every layer of prejudice and privilege that shaped his worldview. Every word was being recorded by the discreet app Arthur had downloaded after the first threat, a habit formed from years in a hospital environment where proper documentation could mean the difference between life and death. "People like you," Richard spat each word like venom, "need to be reminded of your place in society. You think you can play happy family with a Richard? My daughter is worth more than you could earn in 10 lifetimes." The next morning, Arthur received an unexpected visitor, Dr. Sandra Martinez, a human rights attorney he had met years ago during a hospital discrimination lawsuit. She stepped into his home with a look of unwavering resolve. "I've been hearing whispers about your situation," Sandra said, entering without waiting for an invitation. Richard isn't just known for his wealth. He has a history of using the law to silence anyone he thinks is unworthy of being connected to his family. She revealed this wasn't the first time Richard had struck. 3 years ago, he'd destroyed the finances of a young schoolteacher who dated his niece. 2 years before that, he'd obliterated the career of an artist his eldest daughter met in Paris. The pattern is always the same. Sandra laid a stack of files on the coffee table. Threats, financial strangulation, legal pressure, until the person disappears from his family's life. And it always works because the victims are just ordinary people without the resources to fight back. Arthur looked at the files, then at his daughter playing quietly in the corner, sensing the tension in the air. His expression shifted not to despair or fear, but to a cold determination that Sandra immediately recognized. "He has no idea who he's dealing with," Arthur said softly, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "Men like Richard live in a bubble of privilege so thick they forget there are kinds of power that money can't touch." While Richard privately celebrated, believing he'd crushed another low-class family with ease, Arthur quietly opened a folder on his computer. Inside were 2 years' worth of meticulous notes documenting Sophia's stay in his home, every tear of gratitude, every genuine smile toward Isabella, a narrative entirely different from the one her billionaire father had spun inside his prejudice-soaked mind. Every new threat only fed the quiet strength within him, a strength fueled by the very injustice they tried to impose, ready to unleash a truth that could shake the glittering Richard empire to its core. Over the next 3 days, Arthur worked in secret with Sandra Martinez, turning his small apartment into a makeshift war room. While Isabella slept, they combed through every recording, every document, every digital trace Richard had left behind in his threats. "Look at this." Sandra pointed to her laptop screen, her eyes lighting up with excitement. Richard has used the exact same intimidation tactics in at least 4 separate cases over the past 5 years. Always the same playbook: financial isolation, legal harassment, and systematic stalking. What they uncovered was a chilling pattern. Richard. Richard wasn't just an overprotective father. He was a social predator, weaponizing wealth against anyone he deemed unworthy of his family. Every victim was silenced with a multi-million-dollar settlement and an airtight non-disclosure agreement. "But this time he made a mistake," Arthur murmured, replaying the recordings of Richard's threatening calls. "He thinks I'm just another easy mark, someone who'll fold under the first wave of pressure." Richard's assault escalated quickly. The next morning, Arthur discovered his nursing license had been temporarily suspended, pending a mysterious ethics investigation. His bank accounts were frozen for suspicious activity, and his landlord had received an anonymous call labeling him a problem tenant. "Daddy, why are those people taking pictures of our house?" Isabella asked, clutching his leg. Arthur had already spotted the private investigators circling the block, recording his every move, every visitor to his home. But Richard had grossly misjudged his opponent. Arthur wasn't just a dedicated nurse. He had grown up navigating the tangled web of the foster care system, learning from a young age to document every official interaction. Years in a hospital had sharpened that skill into a quiet, devastating weapon. "He's trying to break me financially before any legal battle even starts," Arthur explained to Sandra during a late-night strategy session. "But every move he makes is being logged, every threat has evidence. He's building his own case against himself." Sandra smiled, her expression shifting to admiration. "You do realize we already have enough evidence not just for criminal charges, but for a civil suit that could cost him millions, right?" Black screen. White text appears. "Based on a true story. Every year, thousands of women of color are shut out of professional sports, not because they lack skill, but because of prejudice. But there's one thing no one can ever take from them: their will and their fire. Believe in what no one else will, even when that no one is you. Fade out." The turning point came when Arthur got a direct call from Sophia, the first since she had left. Her voice was heavy with tears and desperation. "Arthur, I need to talk to you. My father is saying horrible things about you and Isabella. He's planning something bad." She hesitated, clearly fighting to find the words. "He's hired someone to plant evidence in your house." Arthur felt the blood drain from his face, but his voice stayed calm. "Sophia, are you safe?" "Where are you?" "I'm hiding in his office. I overheard a phone call. He's going to try to frame you for kidnapping. And worse. Arthur, you have to get out. Take Isabella and leave town." Arthur glanced at Sandra, who had heard everything through the speakerphone. She gave a sharp nod, already recording the conversation. Sophia, listen to me. Don't do anything that puts you in danger, but if you can, record those conversations. I already have, she whispered. For weeks I've been saving recordings, emails, texts. Arthur, my father isn't just cruel, he's dangerous. He's destroyed too many lives. The call cut off abruptly, but the revelation had changed everything. Now Arthur and Sandra weren't just fighting a billionaire from the outside, they had an ally on the inside, someone with direct access to Richard's strategies and incriminating evidence. That night, Arthur tucked Isabella into bed with a piece she hadn't seen in days. She noticed the change in him. Daddy, you look less worried today. Arthur kissed her forehead. Sometimes, sweetheart, when bad people try to hurt good people, they end up hurting themselves. And I'm just waiting for that to happen. In the kitchen, Sandra moved through stacks of documents with an efficiency that impressed him. Do you know what we have here? She said, tapping the files. This isn't just harassment or threats. This is a criminal pattern, conspiracy, extortion, abuse of power. Arthur nodded, but his eyes revealed something deeper. Sandra, I've spent my whole life being underestimated by teachers, by bosses, by a system that only saw me as a black man with no future. I learned that the best defense isn't to strike back in anger. It's to let people reveal who they really are, and Richard is revealing more than he realizes. Sandra's lips curved into a knowing smile. As they organized the last of the evidence that night, Arthur's phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. It was Sophia tomorrow, 10 a.m. He's sending people to plant drugs in your house. I have a recording of him giving the order. Don't be there. Arthur showed the message to Sandra. She immediately started making calls. Let's turn his trap into the biggest win of our lives, she said, her eyes burning with resolve. When Arthur glanced out the window and saw the investigators still circling the block, anyone passing by would think this was just another easy victory for a billionaire over an ordinary family. But anyone who looked closely at the calm smile on Arthur's face would know it wasn't surrender. It was the quiet confidence of a man about to turn an oppressor's arrogance into the very weapon that would destroy him. 9:45 a.m. Arthur sat quietly inside a van parked 3 blocks from his apartment, eyes locked on computer screens streaming live feeds from every room in his home. Sandra had spent the night installing a professional-grade surveillance system with hidden cameras placed in strategic corners. They're here, Sandra whispered, pointing to one screen where 2 men in maintenance uniforms approached the back door. One carried a toolbox that looked far too heavy for simple plumbing work. Arthur adjusted the headset connected to a concealed directional microphone. Every word, every movement was being recorded in high-definition, time-stamped, and GPS tagged. Big guy's not home, right? The first man asked as he worked a master key into the lock. Richard confirmed he's at work till noon, the second replied, pulling 3 small plastic bags from the toolbox. Spread these around. Kids' room kitchen under the mattress. Make it as obvious as possible. Arthur clenched his fists, but kept his breathing steady. Isabella was safe at Sandra's house, completely unaware of the horror her father was witnessing unfold back home. At exactly 10:05, just as Sophia predicted, Richard called the local police station directly. I have information about suspicious drug activity at apartment 17 on Maple Street, he said, his voice deliberately disguised. I believe there's a child in immediate danger. But what Richard didn't know was that Sandra had anticipated this move. Through her contacts in the justice system, she had quietly tipped off internal affairs about a potential evidence-planting scheme involving a local billionaire. When the police arrived at Arthur's apartment, they didn't just find the planted drugs, they also caught 2 technicians on site, along with a live security camera feed transmitting everything to civil rights attorneys, complete with crystal-clear audio of Richard directing the entire plan. Mr. Richard, Inspector Morrison said over the phone, his voice cold and professional, the kind of tone that immediately told the billionaire something was very wrong. We need to talk, now. Richard's first instinct was to use his usual influence. Inspector, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Richard of Richard Holdings. Perhaps we should arrange a meeting through my attorney, Mr. Richard Morrison cut in. You are now under formal investigation for conspiracy, evidence tampering, framing an innocent person, and a list of other charges your attorney will explain in detail. I strongly advise you to cooperate voluntarily. Meanwhile, across town, Arthur watched live as the empire Richard once used to ruin innocent families was being dismantled piece by piece. Sandra coordinated a multi-pronged campaign that goes far beyond self-defense, she explained, pointing at a checklist on her tablet. The recordings of his threatening calls have been sent to the prosecutor's office. The financial documents Sophia provided link him to 3 similar cases in the past 5 years. And the best part? She smiled, opening another screen. The media has everything. Channel 7 News, the Tribune, even the Washington Herald. It'll be on air tonight, by 6:00 p.m. Arthur saw footage of Richard being escorted out of his corporate headquarters by federal agents surrounded by reporters and cameras. The man who once terrorized Arthur's family now hung his head, arrogance replaced with visible despair. Arthur's phone rang. It was Sophia. Her voice trembled with both relief and emotion. Arthur, I did it. I have recordings of at least 10 calls where he plotted to destroy innocent people. I've got emails, bank transfers, everything. Sophia, are you safe? Arthur asked, genuinely concerned for the young woman who had risked everything to expose her own father's crimes. I'm moving to my aunt's place in Seattle, she replied. But before I go, I want you to know, those 2 weeks in your home were the first time in my life I felt like I belonged to a real family. Isabella's lucky to have you as her father. That evening, Arthur stayed home with Isabella, cooking dinner while the news played in the background. The lead story showed Richard being indicted on multiple federal charges, billionaire arrested for conspiracy and a deliberate system of oppression targeting vulnerable families, the anchor announced solemnly. Exclusive documents obtained by our network reveal a pattern of abuse of power spanning more than a decade. Isabella looked up at her father, her face puzzled. Daddy, is that the man who was mean to us? She asked. Arthur turned off the TV and knelt down to meet her eyes. Yes, sweetheart. But now he can't hurt our family or anyone else's ever again. How do you know everything will be okay? Isabella asked, with the innocent curiosity of a 7-year-old. Arthur smiled, recalling the sleepless nights spent documenting every threat, every action Richard had taken, patiently building the case that had just brought down an entire corrupt empire. Sometimes, honey, when very bad people try to hurt good people, they end up destroying themselves. So you just helped it happen a little faster, right? She said. That night, after Isabella had drifted off to sleep, Arthur got a call from Dr. Martinez. Arthur, do you realize what you've just done? Richard hasn't just lost his company. The board voted unanimously to remove him. His accounts are frozen pending the federal investigation, and 3 other families he targeted are preparing civil lawsuits worth millions. Arthur looked out the window of his small apartment, the very place where it all began when he had taken in a frightened little girl on a stormy night. 3 months later, the man who had tried to destroy her life out of pure prejudice now faced the total collapse of everything he had built through intimidation and abuse of power. But the real victory wasn't in Richard's downfall. It was in the fact that Arthur had protected his daughter, kept his dignity, and proved that justice doesn't care about skin color, social class, or the balance in a bank account. It only requires courage, intelligence, and an unshakable refusal to accept injustice as inevitable. While Richard spent his first night in a cell reflecting on how completely he had underestimated a black nurse from the suburbs, Arthur kissed Isabella gently on the forehead and quietly mapped out the next steps for their life together. Because when the storm passes, it's time to rebuild stronger than ever. 6 months after the collapse of Richard's empire, Arthur Suwa sat in his new office, no longer the cramped apartment of the past, but a spacious, sunlit space that reflected a complete transformation in his life. On the desk before him lay stacks of contracts, job offers, and invitations to speak at universities across the country. Daddy, have you seen today's paper? Isabella ran in, clutching the morning edition of the Tribune. The bold headline read, Nurse who took on corrupt billionaire opens Civil Rights Justice Institute. His daughter, now 8, had flourished in recent months, her natural confidence and joy fully restored after the dark chapter they had endured. Arthur smiled, taking the paper and looking at the photo of the newly opened Arthur Sawa Institute for Social Justice, an organization he had founded with millions in settlement money, one from Richard supplemented by donations from around the world. What had begun as an act of personal self-defense had grown into a nationwide movement against the abuse of corporate power. Dr. Martinez is here, Isabella announced, pointing toward Sandra, who was walking down the hallway with a stack of folders. The attorney had not only become Arthur's partner at the Institute, but had also risen to be one of the most respected civil rights advocates in the country after the Richard case. "Arthur, we've got news about our friend Sandra," said, with a hint of satisfaction as she sat down. "Yesterday, Richard was officially declared bankrupt. His last remaining assets have been auctioned off to compensate the families he once oppressed." Arthur nodded quietly. Over the past several months, he had watched the dismantling of Richard's life piece by piece, first the criminal charges that landed him a 3-year prison sentence, then the civil lawsuits that drained every cent from his accounts, and finally total social isolation. Friends, business partners, even relatives had turned their backs once his crimes were exposed. "He tried to reach me again," Sandra continued. "Third letter this month. He keeps trying to bargain, offering to name other powerful figures involved in similar schemes." Arthur looked out the office window toward the park where Isabella often played. "Men like Richard never truly understand what they did wrong," he said quietly. "They only regret getting caught." The phone rang, cutting into his thoughts. It was an international call from Oxford University inviting him to take up a visiting lectureship in social justice studies in recognition of his pioneering work documenting and analyzing systemic abuse of power. Almost without meaning to, Arthur had become one of the world's leading experts on how individuals could effectively stand up to entrenched corruption. "Are you going to London?" Daddy, Isabella asked, having overheard part of the conversation. "Just for a few months, sweetheart," Arthur replied, brushing her hair gently. "I'm going to teach others how to protect themselves when the powerful try to harm them." Meanwhile, across the city, Richard sat in his small cell, surrounded by clippings detailing his downfall. Each headline was a bitter reminder of how he had misjudged a black nurse from the suburbs. His lawyer had dropped his case when he could no longer pay the fees. His wife had divorced him, moved to another state, and taken a new name. His children refused to answer his calls. The cruelest irony of all was that Richard, a man who had spent decades using his wealth to silence those he deemed beneath him, now depended on the charity of the prison system for life's most basic needs. The man who once owned 3 mansions now shared a 2-meter cell with another inmate, who treated him with the same contempt he had once shown to struggling families. That Friday afternoon, Arthur received an unexpected visitor. Sophia Richard, now going by her mother's last name, Morrison, knocked on the Institute's door. She had changed completely over the past months, carrying herself with a confidence and sense of purpose she'd never possessed as a wealthy heiress. "I wanted to thank you in person," she said as she sat down in the Institute's reception area. "Not just for protecting me, but for showing me that there are people willing to do the right thing even when it costs them everything." Sophia explained that she had used what remained of her inheritance, the only portion she managed to keep, before her father went bankrupt, to create a fund supporting families victimized by corporate oppression. She was studying law and intended to devote her career to cases like Arthur's. "My father always said people like you were different, Lesser," she said, eyes glistening with the weight of years. "It took me 22 years to realize the only one who was lesser was him, and me for believing those lies." Just then, Isabella walked in from school and instantly recognized Sophia. "Emma," she exclaimed, running to wrap her arms around her. To Isabella, Sophia would always be the kind sister figure who once shared pancake breakfasts and afternoons building Lego castles. Arthur watched the reunion, a swell of emotion mixing with quiet satisfaction. Opening his door to a trembling young woman on a stormy night had set in motion a chain of events that not only protected his family but sparked waves of change far beyond their own circumstances. That evening, after Sophia left and Isabella had gone to bed, Arthur sat alone in his office reviewing the Institute's latest activity report. In just 6 months, they had helped 43 families fight back against abuse of power, securing over $8 million in total compensation and leading to the arrests of 12 corrupt executives. His phone rang again. A CNN reporter was requesting an interview for a nationally broadcast documentary on the Richard case. Arthur politely declined, as he had done with most media requests. This victory was never about fame or recognition. It was about protecting his daughter and proving that justice doesn't discriminate by class or bank balance. As he closed his eyes that night, Arthur wasn't thinking about Richard rotting in prison, or the millions the Institute had recovered, or the prestigious invitations from universities around the world. He thought about one cold, rainy night, a frightened girl in need of help, and the instinctive decision to open his door. That simple choice had become the foundation for everything that followed. Arthur had learned that true revenge isn't about destroying the one who wronged you. It's about building something so meaningful and strong that the harm they caused becomes irrelevant. Richard. Richard had tried to break a humble family, but in the end had unwittingly helped spark a movement that would protect thousands more in the future. Isabella slept soundly in her room, secure in the belief that her father was a man respected and admired across the world. She would grow up knowing that strength doesn't come from how much money you have or how powerful your enemies are. It comes from doing what's right even when it costs you everything, especially when everyone assumes you can't fight back. Arthur had discovered that the best revenge is to build a life so full of meaning and influence that those who once tried to destroy you become nothing more than faint footnotes in your victory. And while Richard faded into obscurity and defeat, Arthur knew that every new family the Institute defended was one more testament to the truth that kindness, when paired with courage and intelligence, will always triumph over corrupt privilege. If this story of justice and overcoming adversity has touched your heart, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because in the real world, stories like Arthur's happen every day, proving that anyone can stand up to injustice and win as long as they have the courage to record the truth and the wisdom to turn pain into the power to protect others.